Hello and welcome back to the Pain Free for Life podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rob Vanbergen, and today I'm talking with Lorrie Rivers. Lorrie is a holistic long COVID and ME/CFS recovery coach, as well as the best-selling co-author with Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer. She's been coaching people with chronic illnesses, especially post-viral chronic illnesses, for 20 years. Because of numerous requests from clients and the recent pandemic and subsequent long COVID, Lorrie created the Relief and Transformation, Recovering from Long COVID and ME/CFS FM online course, the first of its kind. She's incredibly passionate about offering hope and help to those who are passionate about health and living their big, beautiful lives because of her own experiences. In her late 20s, Lorrie developed severe ME/CFS that kept her bedbound and housebound for 8 years. This experience led her to study and develop strategies and tools to achieve success, radical health, and unconditional joy, and to eventually discover how to address the root cause of lifelong fibromyalgia and heal from it. Lorrie and I discussed her origin story, the root cause of long COVID, myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is commonly referred to as chronic fatigue syndrome, that's for ME/CFS, and fibromyalgia, the critical nature of approaching wellness holistically as well, and her own experiences using our microcurrent technology and how it's changing things with her students and herself.
Welcome back to Pain Free for Life, where we share how to successfully overcome all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And now, here's your host, co-founder, and board-certified holistic healthcare practitioner, Dr. Rob Vanbergen.
All right, Lorrie, thank you for coming on the show.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It's great to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. We had a great conversation when I was on your summit, and now I want to talk to you about your experiences. So your personal health background led you to this industry, right?
For sure.
Would you mind sharing your origin story? Like what happened to get you here?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. I'm not great at that, but I'm going to try. Growing up, I was in and out of doctors' offices, hospitals even, and I got that standard response of, we don't know what to do. We don't know what's wrong with you. And what I was dealing with throughout my whole life was these days that I called my Wonder Woman days, because I had tons of energy. My brain worked really well. I was like a top student all the time, a top athlete, and just, very capable, very highly functioning.
Right.
And then I would have days or weeks or even months sometimes where I couldn't get out of bed. And of course, you also get these things of, oh, well, you're depressed. You just need to go on, some meds for that. Or some doctor put me on Synthroid when I was like in 7th grade, I think.
Oh, wow.
And and then they put you on birth control and, all these different things. And God bless them, because they don't know what the heck to do. And then also antibiotics. Yeah, which at that point, I don't know if they still are or not, but just given out like candy. And I always lived that kind of life where I would rise up and do really, really, really well. And then I would just crash. And it wasn't like a post-exertional malaise kind of crash. It was really interesting. So growing up like that, and then the straw that broke the camel's back was I got a virus when I was right out of college. I was working on a film set. It was a big deal for me. I was an actress at that point and pursuing that career and getting some really good breaks here and there. And I was on a film set after I'd had the virus, and they said that I had to come to the set or I would, be fired. So I went, and it was out on a hot beach in South Carolina in the summer. So we're talking like 100 degrees without humidity. And I collapsed. and had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. And all these famous actors are having to stand around and wait on their next scene starting because of me, collapsing on the beach. At the hospital, they told me that I was dehydrated.
Yeah. Okay.
Just drink a lot of water and you'll be fine, in a couple of days. No, I was ill for 8 years. 3 to 4 of those, I was very severely ill, bedbound, housebound. My father had to feed me. I had to move back from Los Angeles back to live with my dad. And, it's devastating at any point in your life, but I think especially when you're just starting to break through in your dream.
Right.
Yeah. And so the diagnosis that I received finally, after more gaslighting, was chronic fatigue syndrome, also called myalgic encephalomyelitis. So I worked my way out of that after 8 years. The internet was still very new. So there wasn't a lot of information out there. I didn't know the things not to do to make myself more sick.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept on in this cycle of what we call push crash. And for anybody out there who may be dealing with ME/CFS or with long COVID, you are probably very familiar with this. But even aside from that, these chronic illnesses, a lot of them have very similar tendencies, right? So I did get out of that and I started coaching people with ME/CFS and even developed a program that I was about to launch before the pandemic hit. And then, right, this is a beautiful way that it unfolded, weirdly. I ended up developing COVID early on during the pandemic in either March or May. It was an M month of 2020, and realized a month or month and a half later that I had developed ME/CFS again, post-viral. So I flipped out for a couple of days, and then my, and then my practice really, from over the past 20 years kicked in, and I started to put it into perspective. And that is that I know what to do. I know what not to do. It was like an old acquaintance had decided to move in for a while without my permission, but I knew how to deal with it.
Right. Yeah.
And the thing that happened was that I realized that this is a pandemic, meaning that hundreds of millions of people, billions of people are going to be getting COVID.
Yeah.
And probably ME/CFS, post-viral syndrome, whatever you want to call it from it. It didn't have a name at that point.
Yeah.
So I was able to move through that within 8 months, which is a very short time for something like long COVID or ME/CFS. The final piece of the story is, well, okay. So the other thing is that when I realized how many people were going to be getting ill and developing this, it lit a fire inside of me even more than before, because it's such a scary thing to be in a place where you're running 3 miles a day, or, you're very active, you're running marathons, or you're just very active in your life. And then it feels like overnight your body has turned on you. And even going to the mailbox, walking to the mailbox might set you back for a week.
Right.
From that kind of exertion. And so I created my relief and transformation program for, at that point, it was just for managing long COVID and ME/CFS. The final piece came in. So I do experiments on myself.
Right.
To see,
the best way to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was like, all right, I'm going to keep trying different things for this, fibromyalgia or whatever. That's kind of what I termed it. And I did figure out finally that it was very weather dependent for me.
Right.
Which is a whole other really interesting thing. But I was doing some ozone therapy at home, and I just started out, and I was using the lowest possible setting, and I was having horrible healing responses. I was having these Herxheimer responses. And I was like, okay, ding, ding, ding. I know that I've treated for parasites and fungus and candida and all those things and the bad microbes before, but obviously not well enough, because that ozone is creating the but it's killing off something inside of me that's pretty significant. And so I did a bunch of research, and then I started creating a protocol for myself. And sure enough, it took about 8 months of what I call full treatment cycles of those bad microbes. And, I include Lyme in that as well, and all these other things. And I no longer have that lifelong issue of fibromyalgia. And that's what I now bring to the Relief and Transformation course. And that's where we're seeing people with ME/CFS, with long COVID, fully recover. And even people with ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, MS, all these different illnesses, even when they've had them for decades. And I'm actually really excited about using your microcurrent products to support the body during that process, because it's not an easy one.
Yeah, no, it's a big, people they've gone down this path of chronic disease, chronic pain, chronic illness for sometimes decades, right? And it's not an instant turnaround, right? You do have to, it's a journey. It's a journey in, it's a journey out. Hopefully not as long as you go in, but
right.
All right. Well, perfect. I think, there's such I've now not actually met a practitioner in the holistic world who has not had an experience themselves that have driven them, right?
Yeah, at least not a good one, right?
No,
I mean,
you go down that path, you have to know what it's like, right?
Yeah.
And you know what it is like to be with these conditions. And one of the things you brought up that I think is really fascinating, because I see this too with a lot of people, is this weather dependency thing. Like, so for you, is it, I've had it be both ways, but most commonly it seems to be the heat is better for you. Is it worse for you? Does the heat set you off, or?
Well, I don't have any responses to weather anymore.
Yeah,
Just want to make
at
sure
the time.
but before it was, well, the way that I figured out what was going on was that I lived in Los Angeles for a long period of time.
Right.
And I had a lot of Wonder Woman days while I was there. I was like, well, yeah, I love LA, but something else has happened, because when I moved back to the East Coast, where there's a lot of weather, to the Southeast, and especially the place where we live, literally the weather, when you talk to weather people, they're like, yeah, that has some of the most weather in the world. And when I heard them say that after I'd moved back here, I was like, before I'd, gotten well, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Really? So anyway, once I moved back to the Southeast, I was like, okay, another light bulb moment. There's something there. And then I started watching the weather patterns. And I do think that in general, the warmer weather is easier for most people. But then you also have people who are affected by the weather fronts and the troughs and the, thunderstorms when they develop or they are developing. So there's so much that goes into that, and it depends from person to person. So, we think about it in terms of people, people saying, "Oh, I can feel it's going to rain. I can feel it in my." Yeah. And but this for some people, and I have run across it before. Yeah, not too terribly often, but for some people, it's like the whole body and the emotions get affected by it. And the reason for that is that those pathogens, they get squished. And so they start releasing more toxins, whether it's neurotoxins, which affects, the emotion and the brain fog and all that stuff, or the physical stuff, the pain or the weakness. Yeah. So it's really fascinating.
It is fascinating, right? It's like shows us, our internal environment is governed by our external environment in a lot of ways. It's funny you mentioned how rough the weather is where you are. We have a saying, we're on Vancouver Island in Canada, and we have a saying here is, if you don't like the weather, check again in an hour, because it does, you can't look at your weather forecast on Vancouver Island and know what it's going to be. It's pouring with rain, then it's beautifully sunny, and then it hails, and then it snows. It changes with the moment. So I know people with chronic health conditions that live here, clients of mine that have really struggled to control that aspect because of the weather fronts changing. And you're right, like storms can be some of the biggest things. And what I find fascinating about that is the way that will actually change your electric body. Because if you're, the energy in the world, the energy that it's putting out, and how your cells respond to all of this. Anyway, I'm not going to derail this here, but
well, I'll just say real quickly too, because some of my best energy moments back when I was dealing with that were right before thunderstorms.
Interesting.
All that electricity building up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so, so you've worked very extensively with these issues because of your own problems, and then you've got loads of clients that you're working with. So we're always looking to knock the root out of disease. What has been your determination of the root cause of ME, CFS, fibro? Kind of what have you noticed?
Every single person who comes to me with a chronic illness, there is this root cause of parasites. And by parasites, I mean anything that is living in the body that is feeding off of us and not helping us out, right? Causing harm to us. So that includes things like worms. And of course, I think that they're kind of fun because you can see some of them.
Right.
So
as gross as that is to some people,
totally.
Yeah.
It's a tangible, physical. We have a worm dance that we do in the relief and transformation course because it is that physical evidence. And I know it's totally gross, but the first time that I won't even go into that, but it's gross at first, but then you're like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. That's been living inside of me. Been taking my nutrients. It's been causing structural damage. It's been releasing toxins, all sorts of different toxins that create all sorts of different symptoms. And so when you can see that, and, plus the worms, they carry heavy metals, they, all these different ways in which they're affecting the body. And those are just the ones that you can see. So when I say parasites, I'm talking about worms. I'm talking about protozoa. I'm talking about candida, fungus, mycotoxins, even viruses, Lyme, anything that's in there that's not benefiting us and that is causing us harm.
Right.
And that's what I find. And, it's interesting because the microcurrent works along with that as well. Right. So I'm totally a novice in the area of microcurrent. I love it. I think that it's fascinating. But it's going to work in a similar way in that you're tuning to your own body's frequency. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. These creatures, they have a different frequency. So if you're using a device to tune your body to its own frequency, then it's going to help to take care of those parasites. I don't know that this really takes a holistic approach. In the relief and transformation course, we use herbs, we use medications, we use, with the help of your doctor, we use all sorts of different approaches. We approach the nervous system as well. So, but
complementary for sure. Yeah. There's a whole lot of stuff, I'll just say my piece on this. When it comes to parasites, they can be critically bad for your body, right? And there's something a lot of people don't even think about because why would I have a parasite? And a lot of people associate them with doing something gross, like it has to have come from an animal or
right.
Bad
or you
food.
Drink the water in Mexico.
Yeah. And they're like, I never did that. But they can get in from so many different places and they can start so microscopic, you don't see them. My dogs have had worms before. I've seen the worms, and they don't start that way, right? They don't start as this 4-inch worm that you're like, ew, there's no way I ate something like that. So they come into your body, and they disrupt everything about it. And from a microcurrent perspective, when we're kind of changing the energy of the body and we're balancing it back to what it should be, we're making it an environment in which the parasite does not thrive. Because it alters the body, right? It changes things within it, and it makes it its own home. And then your body kind of like fights back with that. I think that's where you get these kind of autoimmune responses, because it's saying, this is wrong, right? And it's kind of like bouncing back at that. So I mean, that's really like from the microcurrent. I wish we could just electrocute the parasites and kill them, but that's not the way it works. But it does help holistically. As you said, you have to take a holistic approach, but it definitely does have a role to play there. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
Yeah, definitely. And as far as how we, get these parasites, they're not to freak people out, because they're a natural part of our world, but they really are everywhere. In a healthy body, the immune system is able to take care of them. But what happens because of various different things that a person has experienced throughout their lives, whether it's antibiotics, which kill off all of the good bacteria, the good microbes that live.
Like you said, they used to give them out like candy back in like the 80s and 90s. You got a cold, antibiotics, right?
Yeah, which that doesn't even make any sense.
No.
Every time I went to the dentist, I had to take an antibiotic because I had a heart arrhythmia, which is another indication that I had these parasites early on.
Mm-hmm.
And what, so the antibiotics, well, first of all, they leave space for the bad microbes to proliferate. And they also, it also means that because those good microbes, especially in your gut, but your whole body as well, but the good microbes in your gut, that's your immune system's first line of defense. So when those are gone, anything can invade in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the antibiotics, you've got a lot of the medications that are frequently prescribed. Then you also have, depending on you inherit your parents' microbiome. Mm-hmm. So if your mother was sick often, or they're starting to do more research on the psychobiome, is what they're calling it now. And this is how the microbes in our body affect our emotions in good ways and bad ways because of what they create. So if you think about your parents' history, and because when you come through the birth canal, you literally inherit that whole microbiome there. And then if you have a C-section, then you don't inherit any of those good things. Yeah. And if you're not breastfed, then you're missing out on a big portion of your microbiome. So not to place blame anywhere, but just saying, there are a lot of things. Stress contributes to a compromised microbiome. A couple other things that aren't jumping to my mind right now. But so when you're starting with that already compromised system, and then you're exposed to these pathogens that are just in our everyday lives, then they can take hold. And not only that, but even if they don't take hold and they're not active, they can kind of lie in wait latently in our cells or around our cells. And then when a big storm comes along, they take advantage of that. So by a big storm, I mean something like a virus or, a traumatic experience or a very stressful experience. And then they can reactivate. We find that a lot of times when a lot of people who develop long COVID or MECFS, the Epstein-Barr virus gets reactivated, right? Mm-hmm. Or herpes gets reactivated. So it's really fascinating. But the good news is that the main root cause concept of this is simple. It's these bad pathogens. And that's something that can be addressed. It needs to be addressed in a certain way. in a certain order, because otherwise you make yourself miserable and just end up going backwards.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it can be addressed.
Sticking to things that are not comfortable is a very hard thing, right? It's like someone that you tell them, you're like, oh yeah, I know your leg hurts, but I need you to walk 10 miles a day, or you're not going to get better. It's like they're going to do that maybe one day, maybe.
Yeah.
It's got to be manageable. It's got, yeah. So that's perfect. Obviously, the mainstream medicine approach to these sorts of conditions is not ideal. And I know that's not your thing at all, but so you mentioned holistically dealing with this. Could you speak to the importance of approaching it as a holistic model?
And it's interesting because when I use the term holistic, I am actually including some medical interventions.
And that's not a problem, right? They do have power. I'm always telling people, you know, there's a time and a place. Shouldn't be the first line of defense, but it's definitely got a role. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, because and part of the reason that I say that is because I was vehemently anti, after you go to doctor after doctor after doctor for decades and they do nothing for you, or they end up making you worse. And again, not to, they're doing their best, but you lose faith in the system, definitely, for sure. And I think that was a gift actually that I received, was that I had to be responsible for my own health.
Yeah.
And I really think that everybody needs to do that and to understand that. And for acute situations, we have a great medical system. But for these chronic illnesses, it sucks.
Yep.
It's just because it's piecemealed, right? So what we do is we take a look at the whole thing. We include the actual treating of the parasites. But before we even start to deal with that, you do your pre-treatment checklist. And that includes opening up the detox pathways. And I think you'll have a similar protocol actually, where, especially for people who are sensitive, to start off with that elimination protocol to make sure that those pathways are open and that they're working. So we deal with any constipation, we deal with anything else that might be blocking that detox, because once those pathogens start to die, they release a lot of toxins, which is not fun. It doesn't feel good. So we want to make sure that it's as easy as possible to get those things out. But then we also take a look at mindset. We take a look at your nervous system and how to deal with your emotions, how to manage them, and to be kind of woo-woo about it, how to get to be friends with your emotions, with your body. That's a really important thing. And so we go through all of these things, and it's also in the midst of this beautiful community, because everybody's going through this pretty crazy experience together.
Yeah. Yeah. So they feel they at least can explain those symptoms to someone that is experiencing it too, instead of, to maybe their husband who doesn't understand what they're going through. Yeah.
Who might be so super sympathetic, but until you've been in those shoes, you don't really know. So and within the community, and another thing that is very important, and this is a mindset thing, and it's to focus on what is working. It's to focus on what you do notice about your life that is good, or what you do see outside in nature that is, that makes you smile, or, the squirrels, or just the little things, and kind of training the mind to focus on those more than trying to figure things out and the negatives.
Yeah.
So so it is truly a holistic approach. Oh, and the eating plan. And that's actually where we start.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you'll have
similar approach, right? If you're ingesting something that is not good for your body, then you're not going to be able to heal in the same way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that does need to be checked off of that pre-treatment checklist before they start treating the parasites with the medications. And that can be a real tough place for a lot of people too. And I understand that to a certain degree, But there's also a part of me that's like, look, if you want to get better, you've got to change some things.
Yep.
And at the same time, I say that with a lot of love because I know that it's difficult, but it's interesting because the people that I run into the people that come to me, they're usually willing to make that change and they really want to. And then they get overwhelmed for a little bit. And then we kind of talk through that and work through that. And then they find us, a nice spot with it. And then they get overwhelmed a little bit again. And then they find a nice spot with it. And they do finally find that familiarity with it. And what I say to people around any sort of big lifestyle change or any sort of program that you're doing that's totally new to you is that you don't go to 1 or even 5 classes of Japanese. You are not fluent in Japanese and expect yourself to be fluent in it within 5 classes. It's going to take a couple of years, right? With this process, it doesn't take a couple of years, but having reasonable expectations of yourself and being able to step back and take a look at the baby steps that you are taking to move forward.
Right.
And how that, I have these little things here. So this is where you start out, right? And then eventually this builds up to being able to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you'll also notice that I have not undone either of these.
You're not doing them again.
No.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember the first Rubik's Cube I ever finished. I'm like, nope, I'm never doing that again. It's a challenge.
I did do this one. And then I was like, yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely, but it's a good visualization because things you can work, you have to start small and manageable bites, or you're not going to get there. And I see similar resistance from people too, but you're right. People that are looking for answers are willing to make changes most of the time. But if you're not willing to make changes, you're often hamstringing yourself. You're not going to make it to the finish line because, I mean, you can't heal your liver if you're going to keep drinking half a bottle of vodka a day. You can't heal your nerves if you're going to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. Like anything we do and put in and contribute to the body, we can take it all away too if we make those mistakes. So people that are willing to make those changes, even small changes, they're small steps towards the end goal. So that's perfect. That makes sense. Okay. And I know you've mentioned a few times already, and I know you recently got our Avazzia Evolution device. So how are you starting to use this device with your clients, with your students? Like, what's your plan moving forward, and what have you experienced?
Yeah, well, I might ask y'all. I'll just reach down right here, and here it is,
shiny.
Yep. And so I'm really trying it out on myself and my partner before I start fully recommending it to my students. But my hope is that because a lot of them, their bodies are so compromised that even the pre-treatment phase is very difficult.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Is very difficult. So, and different people deal with different things. Some people are very severely constipated, so they can't start the treatment until that part is open, until their detox pathways are open.
Yeah.
And then other people are dealing with some muscular things or Ehlers-Danlos types of things where the joints are coming out of place and things like that. And so my hope is that the Avazzia will help to regulate some of that, whether it's, and for some people, it's the nervous system, so for some people, it's going to be the vagus nerve stimulation and going very low and slow. And for some people, it's going to be that elimination protocol and also starting very low and slow with that. So it's very much going to depend from person to person. But I really, with microcurrent, yes, there can be healing responses, Herxheimer, healing crisis, whatever you want to call it, when basically the energy is a little too much for the body to handle at that point. But there aren't any side effects per se.
Yeah.
Whereas with medications, which again, we do use those because it's an important part of being able to eliminate the parasites and the fungus to the place where people can fully recover. But to have this support that is the body's own vibration, I think is a beautiful way to support and to hopefully make the whole process easier and maybe even faster. And I say faster in air quotes because, like we were talking about earlier, there is no fast when you're dealing with chronic illnesses, at least very infrequent.
Yeah, very, very rarely is it overnight recovery. But it's not that we don't see people turn around like flip, right. But it's important that people know that's not the normal, because otherwise they go in and they expect it and it doesn't happen. Everyone will heal differently. I think it's interesting. Someone once told me, and I've kind of reiterated this since, that it takes 120 days for cells to change, like to totally regenerate and turn over. So expecting to fully heal and change what you are in any time less than that is kind of, it's rarer than to give your body that time to change. And you're right. Yeah. While we do see some of the Herxheimer reactions, the detox effects, that can happen with anything when we're dealing with changing a toxic body, right? But it is about easing into it, and the no side effects medically, like you're not going to create new symptoms. It's huge. Right. It really can make a big difference for people. So yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really excited to see how you get your results, and I can tell you are as well. So people listening may want to jump in and start working with you. They're probably getting very excited about that. How do they go about that? Like, what's the first step to take?
Yeah, I would say to join the membership program. The other option is that I do have some, what I call the best next step health consultation. And this is really if you are dedicated and if you are really interested in joining the full relief and transformation course. So the membership program is about managing long COVID and ME/CFS. So we go through strategies, we go through pacing, we go through mindset and things like that. And we do actually go through the relief and transformation eating plan. So that's a great place to start. But if you know that you are ready, then you can, there's a root cause video that I have that you can watch. And then you can also do that best next step health consultation. And we'll talk about the relief and transformation course and see if it's a good fit for you. But you got to be serious about it. You've got to be dedicated to book that. But yeah, I'll send over those links for both of those.
And so, that's perfect. So thank you so much for joining me today. This was great. It was a great conversation. Lots of important information. To our audience, make sure you connect with Lorrie. I am going to post all of her information in the show notes for the podcast at painfreeforlife.com/podcast. Until next time, I'm Dr. Rob Vanbergen, and you're listening to Pain Free for Life.
Thanks for listening to Pain Free for Life. Be sure to follow us, share the show with family and friends, and leave us a review on iTunes. Every time you share the show, you are helping someone take their life back from pain. Visit painfreeforlife.com for more resources, including our free guides to microcurrent, the Hache protocol and inflammation, as well as our blog and online community full of people just like you, successfully overcoming all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And stay tuned for the next episode of Pain Free for Life.